guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to create some more Christmas cards. Timestamps and the full list of the materials I used are in the description. For this project, I cut a sheet of watercolor paper in half and then folded it very gently. Let's start with the background. This one is going to be wet and wet, which means I saturate the page with a lot of water and then just drop in some pigment and let it move around. I can help the pigment to move with the brush by just moving it a bit on the page. This background will be loose and abstract. I create shapes by dropping in some pigment in certain areas and just letting them move around. I'm also going to drop in some water while the pigment starts to dry to create cauliflowers. This dark background will help the Christmas ornament to stand out and pop even more. Hocus green and red are complementary colors on the color wheel. That means by placing them next to each other, I'm creating an even bigger divergence, which makes them pop even more. I will also create some very loose branches on the back side of my card. In order to do so, I wetten the whole page and then I take a small brush and just drop in some pigment in the loose shapes of some branches. I let the pigment move naturally, but I need to help it a bit with my brush. My wet page bends upwards and I'm just holding it down with a finger because I do not want gravity to move my pigment for me. When the painting is dry, I can clean up the edges a bit. I loosen up the green pigment with a damp brush and soak it up with a paper towel. A lot of pigments stain the page and cannot be removed completely. Since I will color in the Christmas ornament later, I was not too precise getting a straight edge in the first place. And any stains will disappear under the new layer of paint. So there's not really any need to clean it up, except if there's a really large dark spot or if you want to show your audience how it's done. Well, let's move on to the Christmas ornament. I don't want any hard edges on my Christmas ornament, so I wetten the ornament and let the water sink in for a second. It gives me more time to work and it does prevent any hard edges from forming. The water does not reach all the way to the edge of the Christmas ornament in order to give me the opportunity to paint straight edges there. Turning the page makes it easier to paint a straight line, especially when it's curved. I always start out by painting all the edges first and then coloring in the center. The center stays wet the longest and this paper dries pretty fast. If I want to add more pigment to a certain area that already started to dry, I need to make sure to wet a wider area so that I do not have any dry spots on the page at that moment. Disturbing the pigment at that point in time will result in some patterns in the paint, which I don't want for this Christmas ornament. Once again, when I accidentally go over the line, I mop it up with a paper towel immediately and I will clean that up later if needed. In order to create a highlight, I'm going in with a semi-dry brush and mop up some of the pigment. This creates a very soft highlight and should not cause any hard edges as long as the painting is still wet. Some loose branches are a really great space filler. I paint a line first to remind myself where I want the branch to be, and then I paint in the needles. All you really need to do is move your brush from your original line outwards. I'm using the same Hocus green here that I used before for the other branches. It's just less diluted. I can easily darken up my green a little bit by adding some of the red pigment that I used earlier. Adding a hint of a complementary color will just darken the color. It will not actually change the color or change the tone of a color. The first ones I painted are already drying at this point. In order to give them some more structure and in order to not make them look as flat as they do right now, I give them a second layer of needles. but I do not cover the entire area that I painted previously. It's finally time to use the metallic marker. Every decoration I paint on the Christmas ornament needs to be round, to reflect the round shape of the ornament. I think it's easiest to do by turning the page, but please let me know down in the comments below how you think it's easiest for you. This marker is pretty thick, so painting fine little details is really hard with it, but I think they would get lost on the ornament, so I'm actually really happy about that. It also forces me to keep the decorations pretty loose. Given the opportunity, I bet I would have added way too much detail to this. So I'm really happy that my marker forces me to keep my details loose. I decided to paint some stars on it because they do have a pretty large surface, which actually makes the gold stand out. I'm really excited about the second card because it's so beautiful and so easy. I made this in a postcard format, but you can tape it on a blank greeting card or use it as decoration or for a coupon. When I weten the page, the paper wants to bend upwards, and I'm using a little trick here. I also weten the background of my paper. The paper will not be bending upwards if you do that, but it might still come out wavy, but that really depends on your paper. When I wetted the page, I left a little gap to the end of my page just to make it pop a bit more. It's also less messy since none of the watercolor will have a chance to get to the back side of your card. I keep adding a bit more pigment here and there just to keep the whole page wet and to have enough pigment on the page. I'm using my darkest blue here because I want to increase the contrast to the marker I'm using later. I feel that the really dark blue will have great contrast with the silver marker. I'm not using the golden one for that very reason. When the pigment starts to dry, I drop in some water to create some cauliflowers. They will look like snowflakes later on. And while the pigment is drying, yes, I'm actually watching my pigment dry here, I keep adding more and more. This is about timing, and the drops that you add last will appear clearer to the eye when you look at it, so they will appear closer to you, which means that the ones that you added first will appear to be in the background. This is a bit tricky because you really do not want to have any puddles on your page. It will cause unintentional blooms later on and they will disturb the whole picture. So if you get any unintentional blooms, just soak it up with a paper towel. And if you really mess it up, you can always go over it with a whole brush and just have the whole painting be blue again, and then you can try again with your water droplets. Once you figured out how to paint snowflakes, you will never stop. They are so easy to create. First, you paint an X, like the letter X, and then you add some more lines to it. This gives you the perfect spacing for the snowflakes. Then you add the letter V onto the lines that you just painted. When I have my first ring of letter V, I can then add some more V's on my lines, depending on how long they are. I can also top off my lines with a couple dots. I'm altering my snowflakes a little bit. I want each of them to be unique. Sometimes my letter V is pointing towards the center of my snowflake, sometimes it's pointing away from it. Sometimes I do add a second layer of these, sometimes I don't. Sometimes the original line is still sticking out, sometimes it's not. If every snowflake is unique, it's harder to spot if one of them looks a little bit wonky. Just let me show you some more examples of snowflakes that you could paint. They look all so beautiful and so unique. thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like my video, subscribe to my channel, and leave me a comment down below. And I really hope to see you soon with another video.